Picture this. My front door swings open, but it's not me opening it. Karen Hutchkins, our HOA president, who lives around the block, steps inside, pulling a floral suitcase behind her. She looks around my fully furnished living room, like she's inventorying her new kingdom. The locks have been changed, my curtains are drawn tight, and she's piling into my leather recliner with the smug aggression I've ever seen. What she doesn't know is that I'm driving home 3 days early for my work assignment, and her little power trip is going to be a one-way ticket to handcuffs. Let me back up. My name is Sam Mitchell, and I'm a project manager for a consulting firm. 3 weeks ago, I was sent to Denver for what was supposed to be a month-long client engagement before leaving. I asked my neighbor Jake to keep an eye on things, water my plants, and collect my mail standard stuff. I kept the utilities operating, kept my mortgage up, and even got groceries delivered twice. The house wasn't abandoned by any definition, but evidently that did not count. To Karen Hutchkins has been our HOA president for 2 years, and during that time she's made our peaceful suburban community her own thief. She's the kind of woman who uses a ruler to measure grass height and issues violation notices for trash cans, left out 30 minutes after pickup. During my absence, she obviously concluded that my house stood too vacant for too many days, and in her warped mind that meant I had left it so naturally, she felt it was her business to make it community property, altering my locks and relocating her stuff right in. I drove into my driveway Tuesday night tired from an 8-hour drive only to discover my key would not operate. At first I thought perhaps the lock was frozen from the cold weather. Then I saw my porch light on, which was unusual because I always turn it off before leaving. That's when I saw movement through my front window and almost had a heart attack. I called Jake right away thinking maybe there was a break-in. But he was just as confused as I was after calling a 24-hour locksmith in a panic and waiting 45 minutes with a knot in my stomach. We finally got the door open. That's when I found Karen, feet up on my coffee table, watching my 75-inch TV like she owned the joint. She had her reading glasses on her nose and was browsing through one of my mags, with the sort of confidence of someone who belonged there. She looked up at me with this smug smile and said in her sickeningly sweet voice, "Oh, hello, Sam. I was wondering when you'd arrive. I hope you don't mind. But I've taken temporary custody of this property, pursuant to Section 12 of the HOA Abandonment Clause." She waved a manila folder around in the air like it was some sort of legal document. The house was vacant for more than 21 days, which is abandonment according to our community guidelines. I stood there in shock for a second, trying to make sense of what I was being told. This woman had actually broken into my home and was now invoking fictional HOA regulations to justify it. I told her that she needed to leave at once, that this was my home and that I had every right that the law provides to be here. Karen just laughed and shook her head like I was a lost child. "I'm afraid that's not the way it works, Sam," she said with that condescending voice that she uses at HOA meetings. "I submitted proper documentation to the county clerk's office and took legal possession under adverse possession statutes. This property was clearly abandoned, and I've taken the necessary steps to prevent it from becoming a neighborhood eyesore." That's when I knew I needed to call the police. I stepped outside and dialed 911, explaining the situation to the dispatcher as calmly as I could manage. Within 15 minutes, 2 officers arrived and I met them at the curb to explain what was happening. Officer Martinez listened patiently as I described coming home to see someone residing in my house. While Officer Johnson made notes when we reached the front door, Karen came out with a pile of papers looking totally self-assured. In her stance, she immediately began with her speech regarding HOA jurisdiction and abandonment protocol, waving around what appeared to be official forms. For a second, I was afraid the officers would actually be taken in by her tale. She was that authoritative speaking with the voice of someone who truly believed she was in the right. But then Officer Martinez asked me for proof of ownership, and I was prepared. I pulled out my driver's license indicating my current address, my mortgage statement from last month's utility bills in my name, and even my homeowner's insurance policy. Everything clearly proved that this was my legal residence and that I'd been keeping it during my temporary work assignment. Karen's confidence began to weaken when Officer Johnson asked her for the same kind of documents. She mumbled something regarding HOA bylaws and community standards, but when questioned for actual evidence of ownership or legal right to occupy the home, she came up empty. The officers looked at each other and I could see them starting to get a clue. Officer Martinez asked Karen to wait outside while they checked my papers as we stood on my front porch. She insisted over and over again that she had lawful authority as HOA president to seize possession of properties. She even attempted to exhibit them, some photocopied pages, which she insisted were legal laws. But when Officer Johnson looked at them carefully, he identified that they were excerpts from a website dealing with property management and had no legal basis whatsoever. That's when the atmosphere changed altogether. Officer Johnson silently called for backup, whilst Officer Martinez started explaining to Karen that what she had done was illegal, entry trespassing, and even possibly burglary. Her face turned pale as the reality of her position began to set in, and she began backtracking, saying it was all a mix-up and that she was simply attempting to protect the property values of the neighborhood. By this point, some neighbors had arrived on the sidewalk, attracted by the flashing police lights. Karen kept looking around nervously, no doubt aware how this must have appeared to the people she'd been ordering around for 2 years. Officer Martinez told her to pack up her things and get out of the premises at once, but Karen wasn't finished battling yet. She pulled out her cell and began dialing someone, asserting she was calling her attorney, who would see to it this entire debacle got resolved. But after several minutes of more and more agitated talk, she hung up, deflated. Seeming even her lawyer couldn't conjure up legal cover for burglarizing someone's home and moving in when the second police unit arrived, Karen made one final desperate effort to claim her authority. She began scolding the officers about property management duties and community standards, waving her HOA president badge like it was a law enforcement permit. The officers were professional but unyielding, explaining HOA powers don't apply to criminal trespass and illegal entry. That's when Karen finally lost it. She began yelling about how she'd spent years of her life upholding neighborhood standards and high property values. She accused me of being a careless homeowner for leaving my home unsupervised and accused of being the true victim. In this instance, her voice became higher with every word, and I could see the neighbors talking in hushed tones as they gazed on in shocked horror as their HOA president lost all composure. Officer Johnson had clearly heard enough. He moved forward, handcuffs at the ready, and quietly told Karen that she was under arrest for criminal trespass, illegal entry, and property damage from having her locks altered as the cuffs snapped into place. Karen's face changed from indignation to sheer shock. She was still saying, "You can't arrest me, I'm the HOA president," as if the title itself provided her with some form of immunity to the law. The scene of Karen being led to the police cruiser in front of half a neighborhood was something that I will never be able to forget. She was still screaming about community authority and property standards as Officer Martinez pushed his hand onto her head and assisted her into the back seat. The woman who'd spent 2 years terrorizing all of us with violation notices and fines was now paying actual legal repercussions for her behavior as the police car drove away. I finally was able to breathe again. Jake assisted me in changing the locks again, and within an hour, my home felt homey again. The neighbors slowly scattered, but not before a number of them came up to me to tell me they had my back and share their own horror stories about Karen's HOA dictatorship. 3 days later, I got an official letter from the HOA Board of Directors. I was expecting it to be some sort of apology or explanation, but instead it was a formal letter notifying me that Karen Hutchkins had been permanently ousted from her role as HOA president and prohibited from serving in any HOA office in the future, apparently breaking into a residence house and trying to own it. As abandoned, doesn't set well with community leadership standards. The letter also said Karen was being charged with felonies of burglary and criminal trespass with possible sanctions of up to 3 years in prison and fines of up to $10,000 when I met her at the preliminary hearing. A week later, her face was a mask of incredulity and fury. She sat there in her court-appointed lawyer's office chair, staring rigidly straight ahead, while the judge read her the charges, looking like someone whose whole world had just fallen in.